Hi, everybody. Chapter 1 is unusual. It's got a lot of terms in it. Normally, I don't dwell too heavily on terms, just in and of themselves. But in this case, with Chapter 1, and this is really different than any other chapter in the textbook of the 9 that we'll cover, we will dwell on a lot of these terms to clarify things, and I'll do my best to put them in the most concrete way possible, and also give as many concrete examples as I possibly can. Statistics. This refers to a set of math procedures for organizing, summarizing, and interpreting information. We'll calculate means. We'll calculate standard deviations. We'll calculate maximums and minimums, or minima, I should say, whatever that plural is. That's kind of an obscure word. And we'll arrive at numbers that can, of course, help us interpret basic data for the purposes of other people's consumption. An example of statistics. So it is roughly true that here in the United States that about 29% of voters are Republican, 32% Democrat, and an astonishing 39% something else, which is truly amazing during elections. And of course, we had an election in 2016, and of course another one in 2020. We see a remarkable fight for that gray middle. It's really interesting to consider that nearly 2 in every 5 people is not affiliated with either party. And of course, that's the sort of the mushy middle that political ads are aimed for. Another example of a statistic in this case, and now when I say a statistic in this case, this is a number that is describing a sample or a particular person's accomplishment. Here's Ted Williams' batting average from 1941, which to this day is far and away the highest batting average for any one season. Going back to 1941. The only time it was threatened was in 1994 when Tony Gwynn ended the 94 season at 394. And that was because the season was shortened by a strike. There was no World Series in 94. He may have overcome 400. It's hard to say. But what that number means here, this statistic, is that he got a hit roughly 41% of the time, or 40.6% of the time. Baseball statistics are described as decimal. So right away, there's sort of a division. The term statistics can mean procedures, but it could also mean an individual number that describes a sample or an individual's accomplishment or a company's accomplishment. So a population is the set of all the individuals of interest in a particular study, of course. So if I were studying boys and girls, or college students versus high school students, or men versus women, or rural versus urban residents, I would examine hypothetically, samples that represent those populations. So if I were comparing boys and girls on some academic task at the 3rd grade level, well, in that case, of course, I would have two sets of samples. I would have a sample of boys intended to represent the population, and a sample of girls intended to represent that population. So a sample, as we said, is a set of individuals selected from a population. And here's the key phrase: usually intended to represent the population in a research study. So if I handle it right, they should be able to represent that population well. They should be unremarkable, not gifted, not the opposite of gifted, and have a basic array of skills that represent their population well, but not exceptionally in either direction. And we'd like to think that that's true. For instance, when we're taking voting polls, for whom are you going to vote? And in 2020, we're confronted with Biden and Trump in all likelihood. And in that case, we would like to think that the people that are called on voting polls, roughly 1,000 people that are called, that they're representative of the population. If they were patently different from the population, they were remarkable in some way, then they wouldn't do a good job at serving as respondents in a poll. By the same token, if these children, let's say they're representing boys and girls in a certain grade, contrasting their skills, well, if there was something remarkable about them, if they were gifted or precisely the opposite of gifted, whatever that might be, in that case, that would be unrepresentative, and that we want to avoid that with respect to making an inference.